We have here with us Yevgeniya Gaber, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, but also she's just come from Odessa, so she's bringing valuable insights to us from the front lines. What's the current situation on the ground? What's happening in Odessa?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. The situation in Odessa is pretty tough now because, as you know, the recent attacks of the Russian forces, they were mostly on the critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure. So that's why my city, for example, in my region, it has been under massive attack. So we don't have electricity now, we don't have heating, we don't have water supplies, and we have problems with internet connection and mobile connection as well. But we have a sense of humor and resilience, which is one of the main features of Odessans and of Ukrainians. So you would very often see people who are somewhere in the basements or in the bombing shelters, for example, singing songs, and then children who are trying still to go on with their lessons, and they go to the shopping malls because they have electricity there, generators, which they do not have at home, and they are still doing their homework there. And the same goes for businesses, the same goes for many Ukrainians who try to stick to normal life, because we know that this is our country and we don't want to leave it, and we will not leave it, we will fight for it. On the front line, the situation is more difficult. Unfortunately, we see how the Russian side is using all kinds of blunt ammunition. There are basically no rules for waging that war, so that is why. And of course, because we still need more weapons to defend ourselves. The situation is difficult, but we see how we are gradually taking back our territories, and most importantly, our people, which we take back together with Ukrainian territories. So generally, I would say that we see how Russia is losing on the battlefield. That's why it's switching from the fighting on the ground to terror attacks with missiles and with drones on civilians in Ukraine. But together with Turkey and our international partners, I think that we will be fine, and we see how step by step we are approaching to our victory.
And what about any diplomatic breakthroughs? Do you see anything on the horizon in the form of diplomacy?
First, to be very clear on that, Ukraine is the first country who wants peace, because this war, it takes place on our territory, and it's our children and our men and women who are under attack. So it's not that Ukrainians are happy in having this war in Ukraine. But then there is also a realization that we want to have sustainable peace, which will be kept, and not a tactical pause. And that is how the Russian side is seeing this situation now. So basically, when you do want peace and you do want negotiations, what you do is stop attacking on a territory of a sovereign state, right? Stop killing people living there. And this is not the case with Russia, unfortunately. And it's not in Turkey to say how Russia is never delivering on its international commitments, be it in Syria, be it in Ukraine, be it elsewhere. So for that reason, I do not see a chance for peace talks or negotiations with Russia just right now. But on the other hand, when we get support, including diplomatic support, political support from Turkey in international forums, in different international formats, to negotiate very specific, narrow things like grain deal, for example, prisoner swap, that's where we appreciate Turkey's help a lot.
And with the winter setting in, how will that have an impact on the front lines? Will there be a sort of a stalemate throughout winter when it's harder to conduct operations?
Well, it will be harder to conduct operations both for Ukraine and for Russia, but obviously mostly for Russia, because they do have problems with logistical supplies. As you can imagine, the local population is very supportive of Ukrainian armed forces, and I'm not only talking about volunteers, I'm also talking about people who are just living in those villages and cottages who are waiting to be liberated by the Ukrainian side. So in this regard, they provide all the time this support and supplies to the Ukrainian army, and this makes the whole thing easier. Then again, there was a stalemate because of the rainy weather, and which made it difficult to go on with the on the battlefield. But now, because the ground gets frozen, it will be easier also for the vehicles actually to pass through those territories. So I expect in January, February, again activation of the fighting on the front line again to defend Ukraine and to occupy the territories.
So you're seeing the winter as having a positive impact for the Ukrainian military, providing an advantage in some sort of ways. That's very interesting. And finally, like we're here at TRT World, President Zelensky also addressed it. What does it mean for you to be here at TRT World's Forum and have an opportunity to discuss this very critical situation going on?
Well, first of all, I feel here at home because I spent so many years living in Türkiye, which I love, dearly love. I spent 5 years living in Türkiye. I worked here, and every time I come here, especially to Istanbul, I do feel like I'm coming back home. And of course, these nice surprises as having both presidents, the president of Turkey and then before him, president of Ukraine, speaking online was a very special moment for me because I think we feel this support and solidarity of the Turkish people. And for us, this is also a liberation war. The same there was a Kurtuluş Savaşı for Turkey, the same this is a liberation war for Ukraine. So for that reason, just to bring back the just peace with Ukraine, all the effort that had been done by the Turkish side and especially by President Erdogan, those are very much appreciated in Ukraine. And of course, being here, being able to talk to you, to speak about Ukraine on TRT World and TRT Haber, that's very important. And I do thank you for this opportunity.